You installed the tool. Your terminal says command not found. Both are true. Here's the whole thing happening. UV installs rough. UV reports installed one executable, and then UV warns you in the very next breath that the folder holding rough isn't on your path. Most package managers leave a beginner to work that out alone. Welcome back. Last chapter you borrowed tools. This one is about the handful you use every day and why keeping those is a different decision entirely. So when should you borrow, and when should you keep? There's a simple test. Borrowing is right when you reach for a tool now and then, because paying half a second occasionally costs nothing. Keeping is right when you type the name 20 times a day, because then you want the command itself, not a prefix in front of it. UV tool install is the other mode. Same bay, but now the tool is bolted to the floor. UV builds it a permanent environment of its own, then puts one small file on your path that points at it. That one file is what makes the bear command work. You can see both halves. UV tool dir holds a whole environment per tool, complete with its own Python. The bin folder beside it holds nothing but the shims, one tiny file per command, and that's the only thing your shell ever sees. Which brings us straight to the thing that trips everybody up on day one. The warning fires because the shim folder isn't in your shell's list yet. UV won't silently edit a shell profile behind your back, so the first install says so and waits for permission. One command fixes the list permanently, and a fresh terminal picks the change up. On Windows, a shim is a real executable file rather than a symbolic link, which is a Windows detail rather than a UV one. On macOS and Linux, you get a link instead. Either way, one file per command, and removing that file is how a tool goes away. Now the misunderstanding. This one is worth stopping on because almost everybody hits it. You install rough as a tool. Then you open a Python file in your project, type import rough, and Python says no such module exists. Nothing is broken and nothing went wrong. Rough lives in rough's own environment, and your project is a completely different environment. So if your code needs to import a package, that package belongs in your project, and we'll do exactly that in a couple of chapters. Tools are for things you run. Dependencies are for things you import. Keeping those two ideas apart will save you an enormous amount of confusion. Finally, living with the tools you've kept. For commands cover everything. List shows what you've kept and what each one gave you. Upgrade takes one tool forward, or all of them at once. Uninstall removes a tool and its shim together. And UV tells you plainly when there's nothing to do. One difference is worth watching for. When borrowing a tool, you pin the version with an @. When keeping one, you use the ordinary equals syntax instead. The mismatch catches people constantly because the two commands otherwise look so alike. And one rule straight from the documentation, worth repeating exactly. Tool environments are not meant to be edited by hand. If a tool needs a plugin, reinstall the tool and name the plugin with -- with, so UV writes the plugin into a receipt file and remembers the pairing next time. Here's a habit worth forming early. Pin the tools that decide whether your code is acceptable, because a linter that quietly upgrades overnight can fail a build nobody touched. Pin rough, pin the formatter, and leave the harmless conveniences floating on latest. A kept tool also gets its own Python, which matters more than it sounds. Upgrade the Python you use for your own work, and rough carries on running against the interpreter rough was installed with, because nothing in rough's environment depends on yours. And because every tool has a private environment, two tools that need incompatible versions of the same library simply never meet. That's the Chapter 0 problem solved once more, quietly, in a place you weren't thinking about. One more flag earns its keep. Adding -- isolated alongside -- refresh builds the environment from scratch and ignores everything cached, which is how you prove a failure is really the tool's fault rather than a stale copy sitting in your depot. Quick check. You install rough as a tool, then try to import rough in your project code. What happens? Pause the video here and think it through properly first. Ready? It fails because the tool lives in its own environment and your project is a different one. So, to recap, borrow a tool you reach for occasionally and keep the one you type all day. Installing a tool gives it a private environment and puts one shim on your path. And a tool you can run is never a package your code can import. Next chapter, something genuinely surprising. A single Python file that installs its own dependencies and runs from nothing in under 2 seconds.